Good evening. I'm Andy Santana, and over the next few minutes, I'll walk you through the project schedule for the Coastal Heritage Cybersecurity Resilience and Remediation Program. This builds directly on the work breakdown structure I submitted earlier in the semester, translating the structured scope into a sequenced execution plan. Quick refresher on the scenario. So, Coastal Heritage is a community credit union with about 85,000 members across 12 branches. In January 2026, a phishing event led to the ransomware that disrupted branch operations for 6 days and triggered NCUA scrutiny. The board approved an 18-month, $1.8 million remediation program. Our objective is to address the root causes, align to the NCUA expectations and NIST-CSF, and stand up sustainable security operations so that this does not happen again. The schedule compresses the 18-month budgetary runway into 12 months of active execution, running January 2026 through January 2027. I structured the work into 4 phases rather than running the 7 WBS branches sequentially, which would have roughly doubled the timeline. The central strategic choice here is parallelism. So phase two converges design work at a single approval gate. Phase three is a heavily parallelized implementation push, and phase four deliberately overlaps phase three, so validation is never compressed into the final week. Each one of the 29 WBS work packages appear on the schedule. I do not add new scope and I do not drop any work. What I did was regroup the 7 WBS branches into 4 execution phases and then drew dependencies based on how the work actually has to unfold in a remediation program, not just on paper logic. Now, the 5 principles on the right drive every sequencing decision. This is the full schedule as it would appear in the smart sheet. Now, 37 rows in total. The 29 WBS tasks, 4 phases summaries in navy, and 4 milestones in gold. The 6 required columns, apologies, are all here, and the predecessors columns on the right is what drives the sequencing you'll see on the next slide. Now, the Gantt chart is where the scheduling strategy becomes visible. Phase one is tight, just 6 weeks, because nothing else moves until governance and the MSSP contracts are in place. Now, phase two shows the parallelism clearly with network assessment, EDR evaluation, training selection, and vulnerability tooling, as well as policy drafting, all running side by side from March through May. Phase three is the longest and busiest stretch with technical deployments and recurring NCUA reporting all active together. Now, phase four starts in early October intentionally, so independent segmentation testing and tabletop exercises are not crammed in at the end. Now, the gold diamonds are the 4 milestones. Briefly on the dependency logic, there are more than 25 predecessor relationships on this schedule, and they all follow the same reasoning. You cannot pilot a tool you have not selected. You cannot roll out to 12 branches without a working pilot. You cannot validate segmentations that is not yet deployed, and you cannot run a tabletop exercise without the underlying playbooks finished. The governance closure chain at the bottom is the convergence point where policies, validated segmentations, and the finalized IR plan all feed into the NCUA readiness program. No circular dependencies exist in this schedule. 4 milestones, not 20. Each one marks an executive decision or a major implementation event, never a summary task. So M1 gates phase two by locking down the charter and the MSSP contract. M2 gates phase three by approving architecture and policy before we spend any implementation dollars. M3 is the largest operational change on the project when all 12 branches are segmented and EDR is deployed across the enterprise. And M4 is a regulatory closure event when the examinations ready project is complete. I kept the count low so every milestone actually carries executive weight. Now, on AI usage, I used Anthropic to help me take the WBS into a first draft schedule and visually translate it here. I corrected Claude's output into a few places. Most notably, the initial draft had branch EDR rollout running in parallel with HQ pilot, which defeats the purpose of a pilot, basically. I added a finish to start dependency to fix that. I also changed quarterly NCUA reporting into a continuous task rather than a single event because this is how regulators actually operate. Now to close, five principles drove the work. Parallel, paralyzed, parallel. I'm sorry, parallelized were dependencies allowed. Gate at real decisions rather than calendar dates. Front load assessment to protect validation, and build regulatory cadences directly into the schedule, as well as walk every dependency chain from a practitioner's perspective to make sure it actually works. The result is a 12-month schedule that is ambitious but realistic, with clear decision points along the way. Thank you.